Today is all about full bust adjustments on dolman woven styles. They're so easy to sew and they can showcase our best fabrics, and we can improve the fit a lot in these types of garments. I'll be showing you graphics, pattern work. It'll be very easy to see and understand, I promise you, so stay with me. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from Lifting Pins and Needles. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and this video is a little different. It is a bit more technical. I have put a lot of thought and taken a few days to prepare all the content for this one. As you can imagine, this topic of full bust adjustments is a topic that we sort of like, no thanks, I don't want to do that. And I'm the same. I am only a C sewing bust cup size. A lot of patterns are drafted for a B, and the difference between a B and a C is not that much. It's not that much, and I can usually not do a full bust adjustment and just go by my full bust size and choose the B cup, because at least for me it doesn't make a difference. But what if you're a D or a double D cup? It can make a huge difference in the fit of your garments. Also, there are some styles that are more sensitive to bust fitting issues, and I always think a dolman style in a woven can be sensitive to fitting issues around the bust. Even if you think, yeah, I've got the circumference, the top fits me fine, the sleeves are okay, there's no shoulder seam for you to figure out, these are too wide in the shoulders and that sort of thing. But you might get pleats and folds and drag lines above the bust and around the bust in this area with a dolman style. That can improve greatly if there is a dart there. And darts are here to help us. They are our friends. They help our clothes fit better, so they are not the enemy. And putting a dart on a garment that doesn't have one is not a bad thing. I have no issues with darts. If they're going to make the clothes look better on the body, then all for that. A while back, I made a wrap dress, had a dolman type sleeve, and was drafted for a B cup. And I specifically in that design felt I really did need a full bust adjustment to go from a B to a C, just because the crossover was lower than what I'd like. Even though I had the ease and the space there technically around the full bust, it just wasn't the best fit I could achieve with that style. And that's when I sort of mentioned I would like to do that full bust adjustment, and lots of you commented that you would like to see how. So that's where this video came about. And I have chosen several scenarios for you to see. I don't just want to show you one way in one pattern because there's so many variants in dolman styles. First, I want to take you over to a size chart so we can see some numbers there, so you can see what we're talking about here. You can see a size chart here. The finished measurements are below. I'm not going to take those into account. I have blocked the numbers here that show you the high bust because a lot of patterns don't have them. But this specific one says at the bottom that this 0 to 20 size range is based on a B cup base, and it actually tells you there that it is a 2-inch difference between the high and the full bust. That is a B cup. And then a 3-inch difference is a C, a 4-inch difference is a D. It even says in this pattern, if you have a 3-inch difference, you might need to do a full bust adjustment. They are considering a 3-inch difference borderline whether you need a full bust adjustment or not, depends on the fit. So depending on the style, you might not need one. I usually don't, but in some I do. If you take your measurements and you know the difference between your high and your full bust, you will know what that is for you. If it is 2 inches, then you don't need to worry about full bust adjustments. You can just make the pattern and you will be fine. Just choose your size and make it. But if you know that your difference is 3 inches, then you look at this chart and you see the measurement of the full bust. You know this was drafted for a 2-inch difference, so then you have to calculate yourself what the high bust is on this pattern. Let's take size 16 here. You see that the full bust is 42. Even though you can't see the high bust measurement, you would know that it's 40. So do that for the sizes around your numbers. Find the size that has your high bust measurement there. Although the high bust measurement is not there, you can figure it out and write it down underneath. Choose that size and you can see that the base pattern has 2 inches. If you have a 3-inch difference, that just means you need to add 1 inch to that size. When you add 1 inch to a full bust adjustment, you're working on half the pattern, so you're just adding half an inch. I'm going to put a chart here that shows basics, taking a B to other cup sizes. So if you are working on a pattern drafted for a B cup and you are a C cup, you need an extra inch because you have a 3-inch difference. You will be adding half an inch. If you have a 4-inch difference, that means you need 2 extra inches across the front, 1 on each side. You will do your full bust adjustment and add 1 inch when you spread your pattern apart. If you are a double D cup and you have a 5-inch difference, then you need to add 3 inches across the front. So 3 inches across the front means that you're adding 1.5 to the pattern piece. So that's how it works, and I'm talking about a B cup base here, but you will see that there are patterns that are drafted for a D cup. If you have a double D cup or an E cup or higher cup sizes than that, you can do a full bust adjustment on a pattern that's drafted for a D cup. Usually that pattern might already have a dart. You can increase the size of the dart and start your full bust adjustment from there. Just look at where you are, where the base of the pattern is, and compare the difference. For each extra cup size you need, you're adding an extra inch in total. So that means you're adding 1/2 inch per cup size that you increase. I hope this is not confusing, and as we go along, you will see how this works when I'm cutting the things and showing you. Now, we'll go back to this chart. This chart does have a high bust here. So you will find some patterns that do have a high bust. And if you compare all these numbers, you will see the 2-inch difference. Size 10, 34.5, high bust, full bust, 36.5, etc. Before I show you how to cut up the pattern and do all this business, you need to know how to measure your own apex on your body and how you're going to mark that on the pattern. It is important that you do this adjustment around the area where your apex is. So, you know, it's really easy for me to just say, just measure from here to there, la la la, but I'm going to show you in a little bit more detail, filmed it on myself. So let's see. First, I'm going to show you how I measure my bust point or my height right there. There is a reference point on your body that you can use all the time, and it's the base of the neck right there. So from the base of the neck down to the highest point, that's 12.25 inches. And it's been like that for the last couple of years. Whether I gain or lose weight, it sort of stays the same. So it's a number that I know. So the height there is 12.25 for me. Could be higher, could be lower for you. And the distance between one apex and the other, from one bust to the other, there, if I measure from the highest point in the middle to the other highest point in the middle, it's 24 centimeters or 9.5 inches. So this is super important for fitted garments. You would usually be using half of this measurement because pattern pieces have 1/2 of the front. In my case, 12 centimeters is 4.75 inches. So those are things to consider for fitted garments if you're going to do a full bust adjustment. For the ones I'm going to show you now that are dolman type sleeves, they are sort of relaxed fit. So this 1/2 point measurement, I'll just take it as a reference. What I'll mark on the pattern will probably be wider, will probably be 1 inch wider. Another thing, how to determine on the pattern, sometimes the neckline of patterns doesn't come up to here, right? It comes a bit lower. So from the middle of your body out there, how much is that distance? In my case, it's about 8 centimeters. That is 3.25 inches. You will find that you have this distance here. From one to the next is sort of 16, could be a bit more, 18. It won't be that much different. So from the middle of the pattern, you measure out 8 centimeters or 3.25 inches. And then wherever your shoulder is, just continue the line until you reach that point. Discount that seam allowance and then measure down to your bust height. So it's easy to measure on yourself just from the base of the neck there down to the highest part of your bust. Wear the bra that you typically wear, not your sports bra or like not wearing a bra, you know, the typical type of bra that you wear. Just keep that number handy because it's so handy to have that number. It's a good number to know about your body. And then, you know how we measured from the middle out what the width of the neck was across? We need 1/2 of that measurement. So measure that on yourself. On myself, you saw that it was 8 centimeters from here to there or 3.25 inches. That's what we're going to use to mark on a pattern. So I'm going to show you first how to do a full bust adjustment on a simple woven dolman style with no dart that is drafted for a B cup. And in that, I'm going to show you how I'm going to mark the apex there on the paper and also how to do the full bust adjustment. So that's coming in now.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me?
This is a dolman sleeve pattern, but first I'm going to show you that business that I measured on my neck. So this is my pattern piece here. I've drawn the original neckline so you can see. I've just put a paper behind that to show you what I'm talking about. When I measure from the center front out, that 3 1/4 inches, which is where the base of my neck starts, and then my head starts there, that is the distance where I want to measure down to my apex height, because that's just the easiest point of reference on your body that won't change. Necklines can change. You see this neckline starts going down the slope of the shoulders. You'll find other ones that are wider. So you can't measure from there down. It's just not accurate because you can't control that. So if you just grab any pattern, put a paper behind it, you're not changing the neckline, you're just marking a reference. You grab your ruler, you just continue that line going up the slope of the shoulders, draw the seam allowance, then measure from the center front out, that distance, that middle point between the base of the neck on one side and the other. My total width here was 6 1/2 inches, and the half of that is 3 1/4 or 8 centimeters. So that's what I've measured there. That line here is a seam line. This is the seam allowance right there, so you don't want that. And from this point here is that I measure down my apex height of 31 centimeters, and I've marked a dot over there. But that dot is just a reference, it's not permanent. Remember, we have the half distance between one apex and the other. That for me was 12 centimeters or 4 3/4 inch. And this would be my actual apex right here. Now, if I was working with a really fitted garment, that is the reference point I would use to mark all the other lines. But this one already has a lot of ease. It is a loose style, which doesn't mean it doesn't meet the shaping for my bust cup size. So I've just backed off and used 3/4 inches away from there to mark an apex, but it's not the apex, that's my apex. I've just done it a little bit back. Here we have the dolman type sleeve. Depends on the pattern or on the style, you'll find that this is way longer or short like this. This is a woven, and you won't find much longer than that anyway. You need to draw an arm side there. Just eyeball it. I used a curved ruler and just found a place just below where that sleeve starts curving, and just draw an armhole. It doesn't have to be exact, you can do it that way, it doesn't really matter. We are going to cut this fake arm side out and then return it back to its place after doing the full bust adjustment. And here there are 2 lines. This line, just start it as close as you can to this curve down there. I've dropped it 5/8 of an inch from this little curve there, drawn up to this point. That is going to be the pivot point. And then on this new arm side that is sort of being created, just look for a 1/3 or a 1/2 point somewhere and draw a line up to there as well. From that line, draw all the way down. The distance you have there, you continue straight so that this is parallel to the fold line there. I like to put a piece of sticky tape on top of these pivot points. So a pivot point will be that one there and that one there. So we are going to cut all the way from down there up to that pivot point and up to here, and not go through this one. And from here we're going to cut up to the pivot point but not through it. Okay, so you can see I've cut there and then there, and there is a little pivot point there. Now I'm going to cut here up to that other pivot point but not through it. This is my center front, and I'm just going to stick a little piece of sticky tape there to my cutting mat, making sure that the center is right on one of these lines so it doesn't move anywhere. And I'm on a cutting mat that has all the inch marks underneath, which is super practical because then I don't have to measure with a ruler. All we have to do now is open this up, and this needs to spread the amount that you need to add. To add 1 more cup size to make this from a B to a C, I need to just open up 1/2 inch. When I open 1/2 inch here, it will open up 1/2 inch on the other side, which means I'm adding 1 inch across the front. If you need to go from a B to a D, that means you need to add 2 more inches across the front. That means that you would add 1 inch here. You would have 1 inch there, and you would have 1 inch on the other side. So basically for every cup size, you would be adding 1/2 inch. So if you needed to add 3 cup sizes from the B, you would be adding 1.5 inches. The more I open here, the larger this dart becomes, and the more length you're going to need to fill up here on the center front there. The larger the bust, the more vertical length we need to account for that volume of the front. In my case, I'm being conservative and I just want to add half an inch, which is increasing it from a B to a C cup. So you can see that this dart, that this full bust adjustment generates is quite small. I would need to put paper. Here you can see what that looks like with the other paper behind it. Now if you add half an inch of width here, you will probably end up adding an inch of length here. Some people like to slice that and move this down, but what's the point? You can just straighten this out at the bottom like that. Now over here, this arm side that we had cut, and I have the other piece here, we need to put it back together, and depending on the pattern it might match or not. You really need to match this at the bottom as a priority. You will find that there's excess here, and then once you get to the top you might have some excess here on this piece, but that doesn't matter. You can add a bit of paper and smooth this out. All I'm going to do is match this top here and just true it out to the rest of the shoulder slope. In this case it's not much at all. Now depending on the shape of the pattern, you might have a larger discrepancy up here. Doesn't really matter as long as you true that to the original here on the neckline there. Just true the lines up. That is a basic full bust adjustment on a loose fitting dolman top that I wanted to add some shaping to. I know that dart on the bust will always improve the shaping on these tops. You won't have excess here or the garment wanting to form a dart on you like a fold of fabric. This will eliminate that. I keep a little dessert dish glass bowl. I keep it here because it's transparent, and if I place this on top of my bust, I find it's a good shape, at least for the front part of my bust, that I don't want a flower there. So I can see through it. I can see my dot there, my red dot. You can see that this dart here generated was a bit lower than here. It's a physical issue. You know, the dolman sleeve heads over there, and I couldn't make this line inside the sleeve, as you can see. So I made it just below that. When you open up, it did generate a dart that is slightly lower. So we have generated the dart. The width on the side is correct for the bust size that was increased. But that direction of the dart can be modified by just shifting the dart legs, pointing a little further up, but just in the direction of the apex, the red dot you can see. So I can redraw these darts there, correct the direction of where the dart is going while keeping the side exactly the same. With blue, you can see there where I've just redirected the dart and drew it again. It's the same width here, nothing has changed. It's just pointing up a little bit more towards the apex height right there. So I put some paper behind here so we can true this dart, and you would just close it up like if you were sewing it. Okay, so I've closed that dart, and I'm just going to draw the outline here of this smooth curve on the side, and I'm just going to cut that. The back has nothing to do with the full bust adjustment. If you place these on top of each other now, you can see that the sides match perfect. There's no difference to the back. You don't need to do anything to the back. However large the dart that you generated is, it doesn't matter, because once you sew it and you close it, you will return to this original length here on the side, so don't worry about that. Now this pattern piece is really disgusting. It's bulky, it's got like tissue paper on it. I'll just be tracing another one out on tissue paper. It'll be nice and neat. I've traced my new pattern piece onto tissue paper, so it's nice and clean and no distractions. There's my apex, there's my bust circle. This is tissue paper, I can see through it. So if I have a print with flowers, I can actually see the flower, so I won't be cutting it out. If I was doing it with regular thick white paper, I would cut it out so I can see. There's my dart. You can see that this style of dolman had a wider opening here. And that's just not because it just wants to have a wider opening. It's because this particular style has a detail there on that sleeve. I haven't disclosed what patterns I'm working on because I don't want to make this video about those patterns. I want to make the video about the full bust adjustment, but you will see when I make these patterns that I have already done the full bust adjustment. So this one has a wider opening, means that the curve down here starts really low, which means I have less space to play here with the position of the dart. In that case, I wasn't able to raise that dart after doing the full bust adjustment, so I just re-angled it, as you can see on the screen. very easy to do. As long as you have the correct width on the side, the darts can be angled up. So that's how that scenario was sorted when the opening here is quite wide. I want to also show you another basic dolman top drafted for a B cup that doesn't have a dart, that has a narrower arm opening here and a different shoulder angle, that has more space down on the side. So just see what those differences are and how you can deal with the dart at the end of the full bust adjustment. I have the dolman pattern that I've just modified on top of another one, and you're gonna see differences in dolman styles. The one I've just done has like a wider sleeve opening than this one here. This one has a different angle. You know, you can see how smaller this shape of the sleeve is here. So depending on what you find, this line that points to the apex, you might be able to actually just do it straight across to the apex. In this case, I wasn't able to because I didn't have the space there. So it'll be the same process. I filled the gap with paper. I have stuck this little piece there. You can see there is a little bit of distortion here that I need to correct, but this dart is still lower. This is my dart. It is extremely long. It is reaching my apex almost. I want it shorter, so I back that off right there, and that is the height of my apex, and the dart is lower. So I'm just going to cut out this rectangle and just move the dart up. In this case, I have plenty of space here on the side to be able to do that. And now I can move this tip of the dart up to match my apex height so that it will make sense. I've traced the pattern onto a clean sheet of tissue paper. I've closed the dart there, marked my circle in case I'm using prints. And if I grab the back from this one and put it next to it, see, they match on the bottom, they match on the sides. So you can see there was much more space to play with here on the side. On that one, you know, you did your full bust adjustment, you generated your dart. The dart generated will be usually lower than your apex. You usually will need to reposition that. In this case, it was super easy because there was space there to just cut out a rectangle and push it up to meet the apex point of your body. That way, when you sew your garment, your dart will be correctly positioned and not down there or, you know, in the wrong place. So that is another scenario that you can find, and it just depends on how this dolman was drafted. This one was narrower and with a different angle, so you had more space here. What about if you have a woven dolman pattern style that already has a dart? They are very hard to find. I'm telling you, they usually don't have them. I do have a couple of patterns from Each to Stitch. You know, Each to Stitch drafts woven patterns with cup sizes A through double D. So the Melrose top I have made in the past, several of these versions. I make that in a C cup. And on this pattern, cup sizes A and B don't have a dart. And then cup sizes C, D, and double D have a dart. So I thought, why not show you how to take this C cup and make it a D cup? Just so you can see how you can work with this. If you have a similar pattern, another pattern that you might own that does have a dart, and you need to do a full bust adjustment, how you can cut this apart. It's very similar, just one little change. So let's see. This is a dolman pattern that I have already made, and this is originally a C cup. It already has a bust dart, and I just want to show you how you can do a full bust adjustment on a pattern that already has a dart, but you just want a bigger cup size. So say if you wanted a D cup, you would still add 1/2 inch to this. This is already a C cup. You want to add an extra inch to make it a D cup. So you would add sort of the same 1/2 inch I've been doing the whole time. I've drawn the same fake arm side. The dart is already on the pattern. So from that dart point, I just drew a line all the way down, and then from there to the armhole. And I'll cut the same up to there and then over here. On the other adjustments I'd made, I just had one line going across to create a dart. I already have a dart, so I drew a red line through the middle of the dart here. So on that red line in the middle of the dart, that's where I'm going to cut up to there, but not through it. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing. Open this up 1/2 inch. When I open it up 1/2 inch, you can see that this dart becomes larger and then that will be the new dart. I just fill that up with paper, smooth this out, this shape there for this dart. Okay, so here is this one finalized. I filled up the gaps with paper. I've corrected the length on the front. This is gonna be the new dart there. It's just gonna be wider, and that is my apex after measuring, and it does match what this dart originally had. I don't need to change that, but if you did need to change that and put it higher or put it lower, after doing the full bust adjustment, then you can just cut out your little dart and move it wherever you want it to be. The shoulder up there needs to be corrected, just a tad right there, and that is matching there. When you close this, it is still gonna match your back piece. Nothing else is gonna change. You can see that the only difference was that there is a dart there already. You just draw a line in between that dart, and that is the cut line that you do for your pivoting. This specific pattern has already the bust apex height that is correct for me, so I didn't need to manipulate that. I just made the full bust adjustment, measured on the pattern, see that everything matches perfect, and that was it. It was very easy. Now I have a D cup front for the Melrose top that I don't need, but I still wanted to show you that and how it was done because it could be useful for you. For the Melrose top, you will not need to do this sort of thing because there is already a D and a double D cup bodice. But for another pattern that you might have that is a woven dolman with a little dart there and you need to increase your cup size, this is when you can watch this and see how it's done. And you can see that to increase from a C to a D, it's just 1 extra inch. It's the same thing, 1 inch divided in 2 halves of your front is 1/2 inch, and that's what I did. And you can see, of course, this dart will become wider. For the next example, I didn't actually do a full bust adjustment on any pattern. I just wanted to show you what you can do, and it's the same thing. If you have a blouse or a shirt that has a button down feature, that has an integrated facing, or is going to have a button band or something, you will always have a reference on that front where the buttonholes will be placed. You know, those vertical little lines going down the pattern piece. Those buttonholes are always the center of the garment. You know, when you put your clothes on and you have that crossover and you have the buttonholes with the buttons, you know, it doesn't matter what overlap there is, the buttonholes will be in the center. So when you want to measure from the center out, you know, your apex to apex and mark where your bust point is and all that, that is your reference. That is the reference that you will use if you want to do a full bust adjustment on a style like this. Otherwise, the rest is all the same. You know, you draw your fake armhole, you cut it out, you do your lines. It's the same thing. I just wanted to show you that in that case, your reference for the center will be the buttonhole marks and not the one that's on the fold, because these styles are not on the fold, you know. The fifth scenario, I left it for the end because it has a little bit more detail going on. As up to now, you can see that I've just been adding the extra length that has been generated on the center front by just adding paper and just matching it. That's because there's absolutely no shape there, it's just a square, you know. Other people say you have to cut along that center piece, take it down and add paper in between, that sort of thing. You can do that if you want to, but I'm looking for the option that will give the same result with less work. And less cutting and less taping is all good for me. That's why you've seen me do it like this. But in the next scenario, we are looking at the Elodie wrap dress. And this is why this video came to be anyway. And I have my pattern piece ready. So let's see how we can do it on a wrap type bodice front that has a dolman there. This is the front bodice of the wrap dress I'd made a couple of weeks ago. I said I wanted to do a full bust adjustment of 1 inch to increase from a B to a C cup. So I have done the exact same thing you have seen me do with all the other dolman styles. Cut that arm side, did the same thing. This was facilitated by the fact that the pattern has the bust apex marked on the pattern. Now I did measure that and it's at 10 inches, 25 centimeters. Not even when I was 13, I think I had the bust apex up there. Mine is all the way down here at 12¼ inches. So I did it at my bust apex, thank you. So I did my dot there, drew my line there, drew my line to the fake armhole, all the way down. I did that all exactly the same, and you can see how this has spread and generated this little dot on the side. Now what I did different possibly in this one to the others was that I actually did cut across here and then lengthen up here, so I didn't lose the shape of this bottom bit here that is curved. It's got the tucks. This is what is going to match the skirt on the bottom, so I didn't want to mess around with that. On the other styles that are just sort of like square at the bottom, it doesn't really matter. You can just add the length at the bottom because there's absolutely no shape. It's just straight across, but not in this case. So I made sure to draw the line across above where all these details are and just add the length that I needed there, the amount that was missing. That means that for the front, my facing will need to be changed. I will need to put the facing on here and add sort of the same amount to the facing to make it match the front, but that's just very easy to do. Now at the bottom here, I've done something to the tucks because I've added 1/2 inch there, as you can see. I measured these tucks and the distance between them, and it was about 3/4 inch. So this tuck that got pushed away when I added this length that created this width, I just brought it this way and redrew it in blue there. The same shape, everything is just redrawn. And now what am I going to do with that excess 1/2 inch? Nothing. I'm just going to sew these tucks a hair deeper, like not even 1/8 inch. When I sew these and pleat them, I'll just take it a little bit more to create the same original length that is supposed to be at the bottom here. So I would say 1/2 inch is negligible. For this specific bodice, you won't need to increase more because it's either a B cup bodice that you're making a C with this small adjustment, or you go to the other size range that is a D cup. So maybe if you're in the smaller sizes and you are a size 8 and you want to do a D cup, you would need to add 1 inch here. Then you would have more discrepancy down there, but nothing you can't fix by making the tucks just a little bit bigger, in my opinion, to still match the skirt at the bottom. If you don't want to mess with making these tucks a tiny bit wider, one thing you can easily do is take that 1/2 inch that was added here and just remove it from the side seam, and then this will fit the skirt and you can sew your tucks like normal. So that's one choice. The other one involves closing this dart. So I have cut from the top to that point there, and then from that point I cut up to there, leaving that little hinge right there. And so if I put one dart leg over the other and just close this dart like that, that's going to open up the waist even more here. You can see it's opened it up like another 1/2 inch. So that means you would have an excess of 1 inch there, which means you could make these tucks even wider. And I would like this option actually. I would actually close this dart and just make the tucks wider down there. It's still going to give me the space I need for my bust up here and everything. The width here is already being added and the length. So from all these 3 options, I think this is the one I would do. In this case, you see that I did cut across and I did add up above to leave the bottom unchanged because that's where all the tucks are. You can see that the tucks at the bottom, I just scooted one over to sort of match the distance that they had because, you know, I added some width in between one of these tucks. Easy adjustments to do. You can leave it like that, ignore that 1/2 inch extra that you have there, and just sew your tucks a tad wider and it'll still match your skirt. That's if you just want to do it the fast and easy way. Another way, if you are just so strict about numbers, is you can take away 1/2 inch that you added. You can take it from the side seam and just fix that side seam, and then everything's going to match and you can sew your tucks without change. And then you saw that the last option was actually close that bust dart. When you close that bust dart and rotate it, you will get excess at the waist. You'll get about 1 inch extra at the waist, and that is what I would do. I would close that dart and just have the tucks be wider. It'll look nicer. The tucks are sort of a feature in this dress. So if they are 1/8 inch deeper, that's all you need to do. Sew them 1/8 inch deeper. Maybe trim away 1/4 inch from the side seams and you'll be done. That'll be it, and it'll still fit. So you can choose whatever you would like to do. I hope this video was easy to understand. Now what I've done here with these full bust adjustments is very, very similar to what you do with patterns that have a normal armhole, with one difference. And I won't touch on the difference. I might make a video on full bust adjustments with the armholes, you know. It's just different in the way that you pivot here on the armhole. This fake armhole, the way you do it when there is actually an armhole with seam allowance. That's the only difference. I've done so many full bust adjustments on dolman styles. I've got a bunch of patterns ready to be sewn up and I'm really excited about them. You can see that the dart generated from a B to a C is pretty small. You can sort of understand why I usually don't do full bust adjustments, but if we are looking to get the best fit that we can on a dolman style, this little dart can make a huge difference in avoiding you getting like little folds and pleats around here. So I think it is totally worth doing, and if you have the time and extra paper, go ahead and do it for yourself. If you have a D cup, if you have a C cup, a double D cup, go ahead. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with more sewing. Bye.
Ooh.